There are creatures in old legends that everyone knows, the ones that breathe fire, hoard gold, or tower over castles. And then, there are the ones that don't get talked about as much, the ones that lurk in the corners of the map, the ones whispered about around dying campfires, usually with a nervous glance over the shoulder. The Cath Palug is one of those creatures. Not a dragon, not a demon, just a beast with claws sharp enough to split steel and a name that makes old knights go quiet. This isn't a story about glory or honor. It's not about noble quests or shining armor. It's about a monster that shouldn't have existed, a trail of bodies no one could explain, and a king who realized that sometimes, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. So if you've never heard of the Cath Palug, good. That means it never came looking for you. But it's time you heard what happened when it did. This is the story of the Cath Palug, a cat that bled the land dry. One so feared, even the bravest knights hesitated to speak its name out loud. The Cath Palug's beginnings are murky at best, twisted up in old Welsh lore and fragments of stories passed down over generations. It wasn't born in a battlefield or summoned in a wizard's circle. According to the oldest versions, it came into the world on the Isle of Anglesey, off the northwest coast of Wales, a place already heavy with magic and mystery in the old days. Some say the creature was once a kitten, gifted or cursed, depending on how you look at it, to the sorceress Henwen. Henwen was a female pig in the tales, and no ordinary one at that. She gave birth to all kinds of strange offspring as she roamed the land, creatures both wild and bizarre. Among them was a black kitten. At first glance, it was nothing special. But when Henwen dropped the kitten into the sea, either to hide it or rid herself of it, something changed. The creature drifted across the water unharmed. It swam, or perhaps it floated, eventually washing ashore on the island of Anglesey. That's where it grew, and grew, and grew. There were no loving hands to raise it. It wasn't taught how to hunt or survive. It learned by instinct, by hunger. It prowled the lonely hillsides, carving out its own place in a land where even druids treaded carefully. With no masters, no purpose, and no place in the world, the Cath Palug became something entirely its own, a creature shaped by the wild, nurtured by isolation, and twisted by the strange magic that birthed it. By the time people began to notice something was wrong, it was already too late. Farmers whispered about cattle gone missing. Hunters vanished without a trace, and in time, the name Cath Palug became a warning. Not a name you spoke during daylight, and certainly not one you dared call out at night. It wasn't just a big cat. It was something unnatural, something angry, and something that had learned early on that the world would never show it mercy. So it stopped showing mercy back. By the time the Cath Palug had carved out its domain on Anglesey, it had shed anything that resembled its kitten beginnings. The creature was massive, larger than any natural predator found in the wild. Not just lion-sized, but easily rivaling a warhorse and far more agile. Its fur was said to be pitch black, dark enough to blend into the night, with a strange shimmer when the moonlight hit it just right, like the surface of still water before a storm. Its eyes were its most terrifying feature, wide and unnatural, glowing with a reddish hue that pierced through fog and darkness. Some claimed you could see your death in those eyes before the beast even moved. Others believed the gaze alone could paralyze weaker men with fear, leaving them frozen long enough to be torn apart. Its claws were like curved knives, sharper than any blade forged by man, and it moved in silence, unnaturally quiet for something of its size. It didn't stalk its prey like a typical predator. It watched, waited, almost as if it enjoyed the anticipation. Those who saw it and survived said it seemed to know fear, could smell it maybe, and once it had that scent, there was no shaking it. In terms of power, the Cath Palug was nearly unstoppable in close combat. It had the strength to tear through armor and the speed to outrun any man or beast on foot. Some stories go further, hinting that it had an unnatural resistance to weapons. Blades bounced off its hide, arrows shattered mid-air. It didn't bleed the way living things did, and when it roared, if it ever did, it sounded more like stone cracking than anything feline. As for its behavior, the Cath Palug didn't hunt to feed. It hunted because it wanted to. It took pleasure in the chase, in the fear it stirred up, and it didn't just go after cattle or wild deer. It went after people, men, knights, warriors who dared to approach the island. It waited for challengers and welcomed them like a cruel host welcoming guests to a trap. It's hard to say if it had a weakness. Some said it was vulnerable only in the moment just before it struck, when its body twisted and its chest was exposed. Others whispered that fire could hurt it, or that it feared holy relics. But those were guesses. Nothing ever really seemed to work. Because up until Arthur came, no one had managed to stop it. No one had even come close. Once the Cath Palug had staked its claim on Anglesey, the island quickly became a place people avoided entirely. What had once been rich farmland and peaceful shoreline turned into a haunted no-man's land. Villages emptied out overnight, fields were left to rot. Even the fishermen who used to brave the waters for their livelihood started steering their boats wide around the coast. Some swore they saw the beast prowling the rocky cliffs at dawn, eyes glowing red in the mist. The monster didn't just kill, it dismantled any sense of safety. Cattle were found ripped apart, their bones scattered in patterns too precise for ordinary scavengers. Hunting parties sent to scout the island never returned. Sometimes only a single horse would come back, riderless, soaked in blood. The message was always the same: don't come looking. It wasn't long before word spread beyond the region. Locals whispered about the demon cat of the north. Nobles in distant courts told stories of a beast that no knight could best. And with every tale, the creature's legend grew, along with the fear. Knights started to arrive from all over, some looking for glory, others simply hoping to be the one to stop the killings. But none succeeded. Most weren't heard from again. A few were found days later, mangled and unrecognizable. It was said the beast didn't just kill, it humiliated. The most frightening part was how long it went on. Not weeks, not months, years. Entire generations grew up with the island as a looming threat on the horizon. Children were warned that if they misbehaved, the Cath Palug would come for them. Farmers built watchtowers facing the water, not to keep out raiders, but to look for glowing red eyes in the night. Eventually, the Cath Palug wasn't just a terror in the flesh. It had become a symbol of everything that couldn't be fought with swords or bravery. Something primal, relentless, untouchable. But every beast, no matter how untouchable, eventually draws too much attention. And the eyes of Camelot had begun to turn toward the Isle. Hey everyone, just a quick intermission here. I wanted to say thank you for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. Did you know that over 80% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed to the channel? If you've enjoyed this content so far, it would be incredible if you could hit that subscribe button. It's a small gesture, but it really helps the channel grow and ensures that you won't miss any more of our fascinating stories we explore together. Also, if you're feeling generous, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and share with anyone else who may enjoy it. Your support really does make a difference and keeps the content coming. Thanks again, and let's get back to the story. News of the beast's rampage spread fast, traveling across kingdoms on the backs of fleeing peasants and terrified merchants. The Cath Palug had become more than a local nightmare. It was a threat to the realm, a creature whose presence on the Isle of Anglesey sent ripples of fear across Britain. Its name passed between noble courts and through whispered tales around village fires, always with the same grim tone. Something had to be done. Arthur, as a symbol of strength and unity, didn't act alone. He summoned his knights, not just for counsel, but for war. This wasn't a tournament or a skirmish. This was a mission to kill a monster, one that had already claimed the lives of seasoned warriors. The king couldn't afford half measures, and so he turned to a knight known for both his fiery temperament and unshakable loyalty, Sir Kay. Kay was no stranger to peril. Stubborn, fierce, and often underestimated, he had earned his place at Arthur's side not by charm or chivalry, but by grit. He was one of the king's oldest companions, a foster brother raised beside him from childhood. Arthur trusted him with tasks others might shy away from, and this one was no different. With Arthur's blessing, Sir Kay took command of the force sent to face the Cath Palug. Dozens of knights volunteered, some out of duty, others out of pride or desire for glory. They boarded ships, their banners snapping in the wind, their armor gleaming in the sunlight. The people cheered them off, hopeful that this would be the end of the nightmare. But hope has a habit of breaking. What happened on the Isle of Anglesey was not the glorious victory the people had hoped for. There were no songs written of that day, no poems praising brave deeds. Only silence followed, heavy and strange. The knights never returned. All except one. Days passed, then weeks, and finally, one rider was seen crossing the misty hills back toward the coast. His armor was scorched, his horse limped beneath him, his eyes were sunken, and his face looked years older. That rider was Sir Kay, bloodied, battered, and alone. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, it wasn't in the throne room or over a feast. It was in hushed tones to the king himself. Of the many knights who followed him, none had survived. The Cath Palug had torn through their ranks like a storm, claws like spears, eyes that burned, a creature that moved faster than thought and struck harder than any blade. Kay had fought it, had wounded it perhaps, but not enough to kill it. He escaped only by luck or divine mercy. And what haunted him more than the deaths was the sense that the beast had let him go. Arthur listened, then he rose. He didn't blame Kay, didn't question his courage or skill, but he knew what had to come next. If the Cath Palug wasn't stopped now, it never would be. The king would go himself, not with 100 knights, not with a warband. Just him, his sword, and a purpose sharp enough to cut through anything. And so, while Sir Kay recovered, Arthur prepared for the battle that would decide not just the fate of Anglesey, but the legend of the Cath Palug itself. Arthur didn't bring an army. He didn't call for the round table or rally the knights who remained. After Sir Kay returned, broken and bloodied, the only survivor of a failed mission, Arthur understood what needed to be done. Not a campaign, not a siege, just a reckoning. He went alone. Some say he didn't even tell the court where he was headed, only left behind a note and a sword that wouldn't be needing polishing. Others recall watching him ride out at dawn. No fanfare, no banners, just a red cloak, his armor, and Excalibur strapped across his back. He crossed the waters to Anglesey without escort, setting foot on the very ground that had swallowed countless knights before him. The island greeted him with silence. Arthur moved like a man who had nothing left to prove. He didn't search with hesitation. He knew the beast would come. The Cath Palug had tasted night's blood. It would smell him from miles off. And sure enough, it found him. No war cry, no warning. The Cath Palug crashed out from the undergrowth like a force of nature. Its black fur rippled in the dim light, its eyes burning red, its claws already outstretched before Arthur had even turned. But he was ready. Steel met fury. The fight wasn't elegant. It wasn't the kind of duel that bards put into neat verses. It was savage, dirty, raw. Arthur rolled through claw swipes, struck when he could, blocked when he had to. The beast was relentless, faster than any knight he'd faced, stronger than any brute he'd bested. But Arthur didn't flinch. Every time the Cath Palug lunged, he stood his ground. And then came the opening. A flash of exposed ribs as the creature twisted for a kill. Arthur stepped forward into the strike, let it slice through his shoulder, and buried Excalibur deep into its chest with all the force he had left. The beast let out a sound that wasn't quite a roar, more like a curse spat through blood, and thrashed violently, but the blade had hit true. It stumbled, faltered, and fell. When it stopped moving, Arthur stood there, panting, bleeding, the wind finally picking up across the hills. The sun began to rise, slow and golden, lighting the island that had seen so much death. He didn't raise his sword in victory. He didn't shout. He just breathed. The Cath Palug was dead. But even alone, Arthur had done what no army could. He ended the nightmare. The Cath Palug's body was burned where it fell. Not buried, not studied, burned. No part of it was to remain, no bone or fang or tuft of fur that might tempt sorcerers or scholars to try and bring it back. Whatever it was, however it came to be, it had no place in the world Arthur was trying to hold together. But destroying the creature didn't erase its impact. The scars it left weren't just physical. Whole regions had been emptied, families displaced, names etched into stone for knights who never came back. The survivors didn't tell tales of glory. They spoke in quiet voices, of a shadow in the woods and a scream they couldn't forget. And yet the story endured. Some said the Cath Palug was a punishment from the gods. Others whispered that it had been born of a curse, spawned from the sin of man, or the misdeeds of rulers long dead. A few believed it was Morgan Le Fay's creation, though she denied it. Proudly, in fact, she would have wanted credit for something that deadly. As for Arthur, he never spoke of it again. He returned to Camelot changed, tired, slower, more wary. There had been plenty of monsters in his time, but this one felt different. Not just because of the blood it spilled, but because of the doubt it planted. If a beast like that could rise from the shadows, what else was out there waiting? The legend of the Cath Palug eventually became a warning. Knights told it to squires by the fire. Parents whispered it to keep curious children away from the woods. And over time, the story twisted. Some said the beast never truly died. Others believed it had offspring. A few even claimed it was still seen at dusk, prowling the shores of Anglesey. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear. The Cath Palug wasn't just a creature that terrorized Britain for a season. It became a symbol of nature's fury, of power unbound, of the limits even a king like Arthur could reach. And in the quiet parts of the world, where the wind cuts through the trees just right, people still listen for that growl, that heavy step, that flash of red eyes in the dark. Because some monsters don't stay buried forever.